Place logic was something or as it's also known as, particularly MCA, I came across when I was teaching at the University of Strathclyde with Sergio Porter. And Sergio and the team at the University of Strathclyde introduced me to this analytical system, which I very quickly realised had great potential. And ADAM Urbanism have then taken it on in partnership with the University of Strathclyde to develop it into a system, if you like, or a product, which we believe has huge potential in the urban design field. And hopefully, at the end of this presentation, you're going to agree with me. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say very little, actually, but I'm going to hand over first to Sergio Porter, and then Hugh Petter, one of my fellow directors, will tell you a great deal more about it. And after that, Paul Spears of WSP will also tell you a great deal more about it. And by that time, you should be hugely educated about the whole thing. So anyway, thank you very much for coming, and I hope you'll find this very interesting. I move the slide on, and that's Professor Sergio Porter.
Thank you. So, what is multiple centrality assessment, MCA? It's a software, it's a set of software codes arranged in a user-friendly platform, which we built through a partnership with Robert Adam Architecture and EPFL in the very last part of the project, EPFL Lausanne. And so what is this for? It is for the analysis of centrality on streets, on urban streets, on networks which are made of streets and intersections. And what we do, how we do that is by inputting into the model two sources of information. One is conventional road center line street networks, and the other is plans of buildings or urban areas. And the good thing about these two sources is that they are commonly available everywhere. So they are conventional sources of information which are really available everywhere in every city in the world, and regularly updated in any case. And this is exactly the same stuff that traffic engineers use, and urban planning offices use, etc. And what we carve out of all that at the end of the cycle is heat maps, where hotter colors stand for more central streets, or of course more central spaces. What does that mean? Is this. This is Venice. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see Venice in plan, and the network of streets in Venice is the one that you can see right at the right-hand side of it. And this is the heat map that we produce out of the network of streets. As easy as that. And also the second source of information, as I told before, is spaces. And we, just to show what we do, we utilize this Nolli map. And the Nolli map is a map produced in 1748 by Giambattista Nolli for the central Baroque Rome. And the particularity of this map, which makes this map very famous all over the world, is that Nolli actually treated, quite in the same way, the open door spaces like Piazza Navona or other squares around Piazza Navona you probably know very well, and also prominent public buildings represented in an open plan. Okay, as you can see on the left image. On the right, you can see Piazza Navona treated as a system of spaces through the MCA process. And again, you can see the most central bits of the space portrayed in the heatest, in the hottest scale of the color coding, and vice versa. The blue spaces are the most marginal. So that is basically what we do. Now, how do we calculate the colors of those maps? Well, mathematically, this is very simple, but this started, much time ago, and it started in the 50s, basically. It was basically structural sociologists trying to understand how organizations worked and how they could actually make organizations of people, humans, more efficient by rearranging the links that actually linked people one to each other, right? And understanding where the flows were, understanding where the gaps were in large organization to make them more efficient. And they actually made a lot of money out of that. And then, but this is social system. But networks have been used ubiquitously for understanding how systems work everywhere, in technology, in culture, and also, since a few years ago, I have to say, in spaces. So we started in 2003 with physicist Vito Latora, who is now teaching at Queen Mary University in London, to apply the physics of complex networks to cities. So basically it is about networks. And okay, so how do we calculate the colors? Well, there are different ways to understand centrality and to calculate centrality accordingly. And without getting into the formulas, which I just placed here for making a better impression, is the bottom line of that is that you can understand centrality in different ways. For example, a place is more central when it is more close to other places, or a place is more central, which is about proximity, isn't it? Or how a place is more likely to be traversed by other people, and it is about flows. Yeah. So it's about the likelihood of a place to behave in a certain way, or to even trigger social behaviors in a certain way. So why this is useful? It is useful because it turns out that central streets have more retail commerce and services than marginal street, which doesn't look like a prominent scientific result, but it is actually. And also because, for example, central streets turns out to be more central, more dense than others. And that across time. So it is the way cities develop over time. It's not about the way cities are planned to be. It's about how they develop naturally in a certain way. And the reason, the engine of this development, is that central streets are likely to have more people in. So this is linked to the movement economy. There's an entire economy which is around how people navigate cities. And if you talk to your grocer, and this grocer is a good grocer, you probably can become very wise in that very, very soon. They know how it works. That actually comes from an anecdotal story which I would not tell you, but it is about my good friend Graziano, who runs the grocery store right front door of my place in Italy. But that's another story. Okay, so all the streets are more central, and that's particularly important because it has to do, again, with how cities work in time. They tend to be stable in time. So cities normally start, as you can see in the diagram here on the right of the screen, they tend to start where the highest centrality is at the regional level. And they tend to develop by putting centralities one on top of the other as they get larger and larger in time. So centrality appears to be really a driver of urban evolution. And that is, for all kinds of cities, in all ages, in all the most different conditions, economically, climatically, etc. It starts to appear like a universal driver for cities' evolution, if you pardon that word. So again, why this is important or should be important for planners? Because for too much time, and I'm a planner myself, so I'm talking on myself. We planners have, planned cities as they ought to be for us, rather than how they are. So it is much better, probably, to plan with cities than to plan against them. As much as you would, grow your children by understanding how they are, what pleases them, rather than attaching them to a machine and, and stretching them as much as you can. So it's really about understanding how cities work as, natural, organic facts of life. Also because, failing in planning cities has a toll, and the toll is huge. If you plan a development in a way which doesn't really has the potential to be implemented and to work, then the failure covers different aspects, from the financial to the social to the environmental. And we are unfortunately experimenting how big the failure has been in the past 50, 60 years in our cities. So this is about trying to increase the likelihood not to fail in planning. It's a good tool for that. I guess that's all from my side Thank you. Hugh?
I want to talk a bit more about detail about how it works now and how it relates to project work. So I want to look first of all at the outputs of place logic. And as you've heard, there are really two key outputs in terms of the analysis that it undertakes. And the first of these is what we call street activity, which essentially is how much activity is it likely to take on each route through a network. And as you've heard, it produces a scalar output where the hot routes, the busy routes, are in red, and the slow routes, the cooler routes, are in blue. And you can also adjust the radius of the study, so you can either look at a whole region or a city, or a quarter of a city, or even just a few buildings if you want to. So it's a very flexible system, and you can adapt to the subject of your study. The second measure we call place connectivity, which really assesses, as you've heard, how each area is best connected. And again, it produces a scalar output where the most connected places are red and the least connected places are in blue. So again, a heat map output. And as before, you can vary the radius of the study, so you can either look at a very large area or a very small area. The maps I'm showing you here are of Winchester, which some of you know in the audience here know very well. And so the two slides you've seen before, on the left-hand side, the place connectivity map, on the right-hand side, the street activity map. And you can see on the left-hand side that the place connectivity identifies very accurately the historic core of the city, and also the minor local centres on the periphery of the historic core. And then obviously the street activity map shows you the main routes through the fabric and how they all connect together. And there have been a lot of other studies looking at the analysis of historic places, which are on our website, where you can get more information. So now I've got a few more slides to show you on another case study looking at the evolution of London and how that's evolved over time, and particularly in relation to the river and the crossings over the river, and how that's affected the centrality or how London performs as a place. And so our first map, we're starting in the 18th century, is 1746, based on a John Rope map of London. On the left-hand side, you've got the place connectivity slide, on the right, the street activity. And you can see from the left-hand slide that the most connected places are within what's now the Westminster area, and it's getting a bit quieter over beyond the city on the eastern side, and south of the river there's really very little happening at all. And of course, at this time there only were two bridges. There was London Bridge over in the east and Westminster Bridge over in the west. And the street activity you can see on the right-hand side, the most busy routes really connect those two bridges together. So fast forward 140 years, we're now in the 1880s. London's obviously grown a lot in the intervening period. There are now 8 new bridges that have appeared in the last 140 years. And you can see that London has spread out significantly to the east. There's a lot more heat, if you like, over towards Tower Hamlets and beyond the city. And also, on account of the new bridges, Southwark and the South Bank areas developed enormously. And on the heat map on the street activity, you can see also now there's a network of roads that connect those busy areas together. And then go forward again to today, 2014, and you can see that in contrast to the earlier map, and by now there are actually another 4 bridges as well, the centre of London, the busiest, most connected places, are now clustered much tighter together, so that the city and Westminster are now one big centre of intense activity. On account of the bridges in this area too, Southwark has also become a much more busy and centred place. And again, on the right-hand side, the street activity, you can see there's a much tighter network of intensely active streets as well. So now I want to change scale again and look at one of the quarters of London, 9 Elms. Of course, as you know, is one of those being regenerated at the moment, so lots of interest. And we're going to start that by looking at the master plan. This is just a pattern showing those who don't know whereabouts 9 Elms is in relation to the centre of London. And this is the master plan for the area. And the aspirations, there are obviously many aspirations, but 3 I want to look at in particular. One was the aspiration to create 2 new local centres on the eastern side around the American Embassy here, and on the western side around Battersea Power Station, a desire to improve the connectivity between these 2 new local centres, and a desire to connect 9 Elms across the river to Pimlico as well. So looking at how place logic can help with this analysis, this plan shows you the current situation as it is at the moment. This street activity plan shows you how successfully the road connection between the local centres heats up. This one goes back to the previous slide, how it was before. You can see that heats up quite significantly. And on the place connectivity, the current situation is quite cool, as you can see. And on account of the good network of streets and so on, the potential for a good local centre is also very evident from that slide. I should point out also, actually, that for the sake of clarity, for just this particular slide, we've taken the bridges off. I want to look a bit more carefully now at those bridges, because there are currently 4 options that TfL have put forward. I want to just look at those very quickly individually. So just standing aside from that for a second, the previous bridge across the Thames, the Millennium Bridge, I'm sure you all know where that is. That was the situation before the bridge was put in. Obviously you can see to the north, the city was very a hot network there, whereas on the south bank it was really quite poorly connected and therefore rather cooler. And once the bridge goes across, all along by the Globe Theatre and so on, becomes much hotter and a much more intense area with potential for activity. So going now on to back to the Nine Elms study, the 4 bridge positions shown on the right. The first of those positions, option 1, which connects across to Pimlico Gardens on the north side of the river. And you can see, although it's quite hot here, it doesn't create much heat on the north side because it comes across to these quite big blocks where it's very difficult to penetrate those to go further north. The second option, which terminates on Dolphin Square, again a big block to the north, and again it's very difficult to get beyond that, and so the connectivity doesn't work that well. The third option going west, and again because of what's happening on the north side, it doesn't seem to have a particularly beneficial effect in terms of creating heat. And then on the western side, next to Grosvenor Bridge, the railway bridge, the fourth option here, and you can see not only does that produce more heat around the Battersea Power Station side of the site, which helps to balance out the heat across this whole Nine Elms quarter, but also it intensifies the heat around Looper Street, where there's currently mixed-use development as well. So we would argue there's perhaps more potential in terms of mutual benefit by putting the bridge in that location. So just the last 2 slides show on the left-hand side, the current preferred position on the eastern side, and on the 4th position there, and you can see rather more clearly how this existing mixed-use area gets also mutual benefit, and how you create more, as this becomes better connected around the power station, it seems to have a reciprocal benefit there. Now I shall pass you across to Paul Spears, who'll tell you a bit more about place logic and how it affects the work that he does.
So, who am I? I'm a transport modeller, and already I can see you glaze over. For 20 years I've been building transport models, and I build these models to shape, support and underpin policy for growth and regeneration. I build transport models to support infrastructure investment. I build transport models to support developer interests. They're evidential tools. I'm sure we've all worked with transport models or transport modelers, and they're designed to inform decisions. They're not crystal balls, and this is for the purists and the skeptics. For the skeptics, they're not a black box. If you're into human geography and social science, then I can explain a transport model to you. I don't have to, but I could. And if you're a purist, and I'm not one of those, even though I am a transport modeller, I have to say that transport models aren't very good at predicting accurate forecasts. In another audience, that might be controversial. But, I don't know what audience I'm talking to here. But as someone once said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. I think it was a statistician said that. And I think there's something in that. And what that's basically saying is for the last 20 years, all the work I've done is wrong, which is comforting. So how does place logic help me? Now, I'm going to ask another question first. What's my problem? This is something you might be able to relate to. Modelling takes a long time. It takes ages, and the technical term is feckin' ages to build a transport model. It's data hungry. The quality is governed by standards set by the Department for Transport, standards that we have to meet for a model to be said fit for purpose, whatever fit for purpose means. And because it takes so long to build these models, I can't keep pace with master planning, especially in the early stages. And if I can't keep pace, then I can't influence those master plans. And what often happens is I have to retrospectively prove a design 2 or 3 stages into the project. And that, for me, becomes a bit of a problem. Doesn't make me redundant, but it just makes me not able to influence. So how can place logic help me? Now, here's some questions that I'm quite often asked. What's the impact of my development? Will it cause queues? What mitigation is required? How much will it cost? What kind of junction do I need? How many lanes wide should my roads be? Can you do it by Wednesday? Isn't there just a button you press to do this stuff? Questions I'm not asked, but perhaps I ought to be asked. How's my network looking? Are we getting the most out of this? Will it support a successful transport strategy? Is the land use mix right? What do you think we could do to maximise and optimise the layout? What? You really can do this by Wednesday? So my thoughts on this, really, and I'll leave you with this question. What comes first, transport or land use? Now, I'm a strong believer, and I think most of you guys are as well, that transport dictates land use over time. If you get your transport network right, then you can create the opportunity, a better opportunity, for growth and prosperity and all those other words. It's a topic I've raised at other talks, and I can talk quite passionately about it, especially after another glass of wine or so. I think the planning process we have, and London is a really good example, is done the wrong way round. In London and everywhere else, we plan the land use first. We prepare the site allocations. We say this is where we're going to develop, and this is what it's going to be. It's going to be jobs here, it's going to be housing over there. Well, actually, it should be the other way around, because we're always asking our transport networks to respond to those land use allocations. If we did it the other way around, which history shows us is the right way to do it, then we have a better chance of creating the right blend and the right mix. And place logic allows me to do that, because it allows me, as a transport modeller, to get in on the process at stage 1. It allows me to have the time to influence those decisions if you blend in the transport modelling traditional skills that I and colleagues like myself have to influence those early stages. Now, at the press of a button, which is how modelling should be done, if you were listening. This is Gabon in Africa, the country Gabon, and I don't know if you know your African geography very well. The capital city, Libreville, is down here, and the international airport is just there, and up here is kind of like a semi-planned urban extension, but not going too well. So the client has stepped in and said, what we need to do to develop this master plan properly is not do what we'd already done before, which wasn't very well planned at all, as you can see by the colour gradings on the network. So in the new master plan, and we ran place logic through several iterations, relatively quickly, I'm talking days, not years, to arrive at a new network that we could put in front of the master planners, and with their ambitions and aspirations for the project, could look at this and see that the radial corridors, and it's outside on the board if you can be bothered to read it, the radial corridors are all carrying an equal heat, which means that the movement through the master plan area is spread quite fairly across the whole width. This means that the whole master plan area has got an equal opportunity to succeed. It also helps with the land use mix, because you can start to apply the land use mix that correlates with the network as we would understand it. And we also ran many iterations to check that the orbital corridors, there's a couple that come across here, to make sure that those connected the radial routes in the right in the right level of heat as well, because we didn't want the radials to stand out on their own. They needed to also act together as a master plan together. Now, I couldn't have done this with a transport model given the time frames and the availability of data. But with this tool, it gives me a very early heads up, so that when you do get down the road and you do get to the stage where you do need to design the width of roads and the type of junctions and so on, we've already established a strong network. So I'm not saying transport modeling's done for. We're still here, still going to do stuff, but it means that when I do stuff, there's a better chance that we've made the best start. And that's all I have to say, really. I'm a supporter of this. It's another tool, it's a planning tool that allows me as a transport modeller to have the complete toolkit throughout the whole design process.
So anyway, well, I just say thank you all very much for coming, and I do hope you believe, as we do, that this is actually a very valuable means of a tool for developing good urban design and good master planning. It's not the only thing, you know. It's not a, you say, as Paul, it's not a black box where you press a button and, you know, out pops the answer. But it's a very powerful tool. It has great value, and it can be done relatively simply and easily in a relatively accessible form. So anyway, thanks for coming. Enjoy the canapes, which are out there. Get another drink. And any of these mugs here, and me, we'll try to answer any questions that you've got, which I'm sure you have. Thanks for coming.